right, everybody, welcome back into Concrete Jungle in New York Baseball Podcast. Lot to get to. I am Paul Russo. That's Kyle Evans. Nate Sharpman behind the scenes. You'll hear his voice from time to time, handling all our production stuff, boys. Been a while. Lot to get to. Really looking forward to a fun little winter edition of Concrete Jungle.
Yeah, it's definitely been a while, but with all the moves happening, it's definitely worth, time to get back and talk about it.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Nate, there is a Pittsburgh mention in this episode, by the way. Hope you're prepared for it.
Looking forward to it, Paul.
You have no idea about who it is, do you? He does not. All right. Look, free agency, other transactions kind of happening. Cover all that. Cover the awards that have been given out. Kind of give, I guess, our 2 cents on it. Kind of give, I guess, a little bit of a shakedown. What we're kind of looking at, we're looking at probably another podcast sometime in January at this point. And then February, probably a couple more at that point. And then really March, a little bit more often before we're back into our full-fledged deal usually. Catch us, obviously, when we're live here on YouTube, the 24/7 Finger Lakes 1 stream as well, or anytime afterwards on either platform there, as well as other major podcasting platforms. But now that we got the red tape out of the way, let's talk some baseball. Who's ready? Let's start with the Yankees, obviously, for at least us up here. I guess in terms of maybe the amount of free agency signings, it's not as much as the Mets, but certainly the money initially kind of rivals a little bit. So, obviously, the elephant in the room, Aaron Judge, things got a bit murky and dark there for a little bit, but he does return. Mega deal, Yankee for life, captain. He will have the captaincy apparently on the jersey. How do we feel about that?
Yeah, first, John Heyman, like a lot of people said, should be in prison for that awful
I don't know
tweet.
about prison, but
jumped the gun a little bit there. It definitely made me nervous.
made me nervous. I had been saying Giants the whole time. That's what I legitimately thought.
Arson Judge is just incredible. The fact that he called him Arson Judge.
And based on
I'll
reports,
live forever.
based on the reports too, it just seemed like the Giants were doing so much to try to lure him in, and I thought it was actually going to work. But yeah, it's good to have Judge back. Obviously, that was the main thing in the offseason that the Yankees needed to do. I don't expect him to have the same type of season that he just came off from, but still having his bat in the lineup and his defense every night is pretty huge.
Yeah. Judge deal, mega deal, right? 9 years, $360 million. That's an average annual value of $40 million on the books. Look, I mean, this is a guy that I feel like with the Yankees, we've, as a team, kind of been, I wouldn't say a ship lost at sea necessarily in the locker room. I think a lot of people really wanted Brett Gardner to kind of step up and be that next man up from Jeter, and it just never happened. But Judge certainly goes about it a little bit differently than Jeter, I'd say. He's a little bit more, I'd call it charismatic, even with his teammates, as opposed to the way Jeter was. And certainly, he's the voice of the locker room. He commands the locker room. And I think this deal, like I said, it locks him in. Yankee forever, right? For better or worse, because that's an albatross of a contract to try and unload if it were ever to come to that case. So he's locked in. And at this point, and we'll get to one signing that occurred before and another one that occurred after here in a second, to me now, there are obviously spots the team needs to improve upon, but to me, a lot of it now is just icing on the cake, the fact that the Judge deal got done.
Yeah. Also, I think we should shout out Hal Steinbrenner for picking up the phone and actually getting this deal done.
A guy who we have been very critical of, to be quite honest.
Yeah, because it really seriously does sound like Cashman was only going to give him 8 years, and that probably would have set him off to the Giants. So shout out to Hal. I think they said he was in Italy too on vacation. Yeah. So that was huge. Shout out to Hal for really bringing him back.
Hal in Italy. Judge, who was on his way to Hawaii, stops in San Diego to have a meeting with the Padres on the way there. Talk about international, whatever. Didn't really mention it, but it's worth noting the Cashman deal that you bring up, but Cashman does sign back on for 4 years.
Yep.
I'd have to imagine that there's probably a lot of caveats there to have him, whether it's be buyouts, opt-outs on both ends, stuff like that. Because the fact of the matter is, and we like I said, we've been critical of both, really, but the fact that Hal was the one who got on the horn in order to shore up this Aaron Judge deal, that's kind of startling to me. The fact that days before, Cashman's announced that he got a new deal for 4 more years.
And I'm sure him and Hal actually talked about, obviously, like how much they would give him, how many years.
Right.
So it's kind of odd that he wasn't going to go 1 extra year, and a little bit more money to bring back, a player that means so much to your franchise.
Right.
So, yeah, it was kind of alarming to see that.
Speaking of meaning a lot, one signing that did happen before the Judge signing, and I think was a pretty good indicator of perhaps where Judge was at least initially leaning, was Anthony Rizzo. Signs on for a guaranteed 2 years. There's a third-year option that he and the club can opt into, but 2 years, $40 million. Obviously, that's $20 million for the average annual value. Locks in first base for what is going to be at least part one of what I'm going to call the Yankee window at the moment. And a position that, to be honest, the Yankees don't really have any prospects kind of lingering behind at this point at first. So it gives you the veteran guy who, one, enjoys playing in New York, but probably two, more importantly, gets along with everybody in the clubhouse pretty good. And look, valuable bat, valuable piece, and the money is on par again, not to kind of bring up a dead horse from the past here, but pretty much on par for what the Dodgers gave Freddie Freeman.
Yeah, it was a really good re-signing. I thought all along that they should have done that move, and I really didn't know who else they could have, possibly signed that would have been a better option. I guess they could have looked in the trade market, but I mean, what are you really going to find? And you're probably going to give up a lot. So I think the best thing was just to re-sign Rizzo, and they did that. And
they did. There was one possible cheaper option. Jose Abreu would have been equal, if not more money. Obviously, he signed with Houston. Josh Bell would have been a cheaper option. He signed on, actually, I believe it was the day after Judge signed with Cleveland for a 2-year deal, which is actually a sneaky good deal for Cleveland and him, actually, to be honest. But to me, Rizzo was the way to go. Guy who knows what to do in a big market, and a guy who, like I said, been in the clubhouse, knows the guys, knows the ins and outs. Speaking of guys returning, Tommy Kahnle. 2-year deal, $11.5 million, $5.75 million on the average annual value. I found this deal interesting. I'm a big Kahnle guy. I think when he's on, he's borderline top 5 in the league with his stuff sometimes. That being said, obviously last year started on the IL, coming off injury, comes back with the Dodgers for a little bit. Really looked pretty on until he got dinged up again. But like I said, it's caught me off guard because this was a guy who, when he left New York, was not thrilled with the Yankees, the way he was treated, and I don't blame him. But this is a guy who, this shores up the back of the bullpen, going forward. Obviously the Yankees probably not going to bring back Chapman. You kind of have your closer still in mind with Clay Holmes. I think it will be his more or less to technically lose in spring training in the beginning of the season. But that being said, I think Saga probably has an opportunity to go ahead at it. And I think, if push comes to shove, I think Kahnle could be a guy as well that you could see in the 9th inning of a ball game.
Yeah, I really like the move. I obviously think he's a better option than Miguel Castro was.
Right. And we'll touch on him obviously in a second.
And if you guys have Twitch, you could obviously watch Tommy Kahnle. Mm-hmm. He's been talking about his deal a lot lately. I've been watching. He says that this is the best he's felt since 2019. He's excited to be back. He never thought he would be back. And then someone asked him, do you think you could close for this team? Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, that's exactly, I want to be, either the setup man or the 9th inning guy. Yeah. And I think he would thrive in that situation.
And to me, I think he will be the setup guy. I think he, and this can kind of bring into our, a couple guys the Yankees have lost in free agency so far, kind of be what the Yankees hoped Miguel Castro could have been in the 8th inning. Again, like I said, you have other guys vying for positions back there. Saga comes to mind. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what they do with Michael King when he comes back. Although I think I picture more King kind of filling into a Chad Greenish role, kind of being the first man out of the bullpen and can go, a number of innings if necessary type deal, which is kind of what he did anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of this. I think it shores up that back end of the bullpen, like I said, in the way that few relievers really on the market kind of can at this point.
My one take on the Yankees is obviously those 3 moves are really good. But aside from Canely, they're pretty much they brought back 2 players that they had last year. Mm-hmm. So really, I think there's still work to be done. They haven't really improved much other than helping or getting their bullpen a little stronger.
Yeah, and I mean obviously Carlos Rodon's the next big target I'd say for New York. I personally speaking, I have a hard time believing Rodon doesn't go to New York. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. Obviously, the sports happen. But the mutual interest between both is there. I think a lot of it comes down to details at this point.
Yeah, and so many people keep talking about it, like big reporters. Mm-hmm. And then there's a bunch of clips. I saw that he was on CC's podcast.
Yeah, he was on R2C2 last offseason.
Yeah, and he said he would, basically love to be a Yankee, and I think he would pitch well in the big market.
So we mentioned a couple of players the Yankees have lost in free agency so far. We'll start with Miguel Castro. It's a little bit of a lesser one. He signed a 1-year, $3.5 million deal with Arizona. In baseball, any arm is a tough one to lose in the bullpen. You probably won't lose too much sleep in the fact that it was Castro. He walked, but look, he was a guy that the Yankees traded Yuli Rodriguez for, and we'll talk about him in a few minutes as well, oddly enough. But hope to kind of shore up the back of the bullpen. Didn't go as well as you'd hoped. And now really was just a 1-year kind of rental deal, and he's on his way. But it's not that big of a hit in the checkbook if you look at it that way. $3.5 million for him. Probably what the Yankees probably would have had to pay anyway, but 1-year deal, he can go, and he's going on more or less a prove-it deal for himself, in my opinion, in Arizona.
Yeah, I think he performed better than Rodriguez would have performed, but I don't think it's really that big of a loss to lose him. I like him, though. I hope he does well in Arizona. Yeah. But yeah, getting Canely and losing him, I think, is a big move.
Now, to me, this one is definitely a bigger hit to the Yankees. Jameson Taillon signs a 4-year, $68 million deal with the Cubs, $17 million on the average annual value. If that's what it would have taken, I kind of wonder if the Yankees were in it at all. Because to me, and I know a lot of people probably disagree with me here, but man, outside of Cole, and really to be fair to Taillon, for the better part of the year, he might have been more consistent than Cole a lot of the times. And this one, to me, is just a hard pill to swallow. Taillon's just a workhorse, goes out there, does a job, and for $17 million a year, I kind of feel like the Yankees could have gotten something done.
Yeah, the team's record when he pitched, I remember it was really good. I think it was maybe even better than Garrett Cole. He always had them in the game, always gave them a chance to win. And then a lot of people are pointing out, like, why didn't they at least offer him the qualifying offer?
Right.
But yeah, I agree. If they don't get Rodon, then that's kind of a mistake there by not bringing Taillon back.
Right. Now, the Yankees have been involved in some discussions with, like, the Marlins again over, like, a guy like Pablo Sanchez, and I don't know. I don't know. I like Pablo. I think if the Yankees do trade for him, I won't be upset, but I think there's a little bit of known commodity factor with Taillon there that just a harder pill to swallow.
Yeah, and we just don't know what Frankie Montas is going to do when he's healthy. I don't think he's a number 2, but I do think he can pitch better than he did last year.
I think the 2 at the moment, and this is looking at without Rodon, obviously, I think the 2 at the moment is still locked up to be Nestor at this point.
And 73.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So the Yankees, compared to the Mets, the Yankees have not done a ton, and this also includes in my other transaction category here. Yankees have claimed right-handed pitcher Junior Fernandez off waivers from the Pirates. Bit of a reclamation project here for Blake. Should he sign back on, he's technically a free agent.
Yeah.
But I haven't really seen any indications saying he's not going to come back. But anyway, Fernandez, really good guy. A lot of people compare him and actually aware to where Efros was in a way, in going into really 2 technically off seasons ago, where there's a lot there, just a bit of a loose cannon, and if there's a guy to figure out, it's probably going to be Matt Blake. Yankees also selected contracts of right-handed pitchers Randy Vasquez, Yanni Brito, Jimmy Cordero, and left-hand pitcher Matt Crook from their minor league system. They're all up on the 40-man roster now. So
Yeah, and those moves were made because they could have lost, I think, some of them in the Rule 5 draft.
Yep. Yeah. I kind of left a lot of the Rule 5 stuff off the radar here for this podcast only because for the most part, Rule 5 this year was overall kind of quiet.
Yeah.
There were selections made really across the MLB, but nothing really in the first few rounds that made you really jump out. So if there was anything major, like say, for instance, Greg Wessert got picked up by somebody, then I probably would have brought something up. But
maybe the only interesting thing was the Red Sox taking a Yankees pitcher for the third straight year.
Yeah.
So I don't know who the guy was, but probably nothing big.
Well, hopefully he doesn't turn into Garrett Whitlock.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the Mets and their free agency. They have been beyond active. We'll start with the guys that they have brought back on returning deals. Outfielder Brandon Nimmo, 8-year deal, $162 million, $20.25 million on the average annual value. To me, slam dunk home run deal. Obviously, look, Nimmo's not Aaron Judge, but Nimmo is by far, in a way, one of the more quality outfielders in the league. Great bat. And to me, for $20.25 on the average annual value on your book, I mean, that's a steal to me. It really is. And the fact of the matter is, I feel like Nimmo probably could have gone and gotten a little bit more money somewhere, but what Steve Cohen probably did was gave him a couple extra years on the deal. And you talk about Judge as a Yankee forever now. Nimmo's probably a Met forever.
Yeah,
and that's a great, great thing.
Yeah, and if I'm Nimmo, I'm definitely taking a little less money based on what Steve Cohen's doing with this team.
Yeah.
This team is ready to win, and this team, I think, is going to win a lot of games with the additions that they brought in.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets have, like I said, to me, they've won winter so far. And we'll obviously talk about the subtractions because there's big name. Yeah. But they've more so than brought in. They've retained, and they've done a really great job kind of working behind the scenes on some other deals, which we'll touch on in a second as well. Edwin Diaz, 5 years, $102 million, shade under $20.5 million on the average annual value. Again, slam dunk deal for by far the best closer in baseball last year. Look, Diaz certainly has his peaks and valleys, but those peaks, man, when they're high, they're high. And to be fair, when the valleys are low for him, they're not incredibly all that bad.
Yeah, I agree. More times than not, he's pretty much on every night, and his strikeout rate wasn't it like a record-breaking?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, if I was Steve Cohen, right when the offseason started, I would have been very confident with bringing him back. And of course, it didn't take long for them to bring him back. I think wasn't it even before the winter meetings?
Yeah, it was. I mean, his deal was kind of in the way Rizzo's deal was, where it was within really the first couple of days that they got it done.
Yeah.
After qualifying offers were offered.
And obviously he wants to be there, and he knows, this team is, win now mode.
And to me, that's the big thing, right, with the Mets. I kind of mentioned it actually to Josh a little bit today on Finger Lakes Today. The past 15 years, really, I guess it kind of just goes back maybe even deeper technically, but the Mets have been a team that we just meme.
Yeah, like batting out of order and that kind of stuff.
Right, but for the first time, I mean, to me anyway, speaking, Diaz was a team outsider, right? They went out part of a trade, and really, to be fair, was not the key piece to the trade in all fairness. He wants to be there. Signs back on. Nimmo took less money, in all fairness, to stay. How awesome is that if you're a Mets fan? How awesome is that if you are part of the Mets organization that you have guys now at this point more than willing to stay once they've been there?
Yeah, and even free agents, when they're looking for teams, they see the Mets and they see a team that's spending money and, is ready to win now. So I think that really draws a lot of attention to the free agents that, want to come and play for the team.
Now, look at Justin Verlander. Comes in, and this is after, right on the heels of Jacob deGrom signing with the Rangers. 2 years, and this is my favorite part of the deal. I don't think a lot of people realize. I don't know if it's necessarily a superstition thing that Verlander has or what. Verlander's contract is 2 years, $86,666,666.
That's kind of interesting.
So obviously, an average annual value of $43,333,333. I love it because, you know, it's tough because I do think it's a little bit of an overpay. Beyond that, anyway, but you're not stretching the deal all that far out. I think it's going to be tough for Verlander to replicate what he did this past season. Obviously, age 40, it's a tough spot, but still a quality piece. He replaces deGrom in a way that I don't think any other pitcher probably could on the market. Not even Rodon, not even Senga, and we'll talk about Senga anyway here in a minute, but you get Verlander in, he's with Scherzer again. They're both very good with each other. And to me, this is a sign that the Mets are going to go for within the next couple of years. And if Verlander does decide to call it quits in 2 years, that's fine because your prospects that you have behind him now at this point should be more than ready to go. The Mets, the beauty about this deal compared to, say, like the Yankees with Rizzo in a way, is the Mets do have those pitching prospects on the horizon. You know, Jose Buto, we'll probably actually see him in the major leagues more often than we did this past year. But he should be more than ready to go in 2 years. And you have a couple guys that were in Brooklyn and trickled up to Binghamton by the end of the year that should be more than ready to go as well at that point.
Yeah, I thought they overpaid for Verlander for a little too much, but obviously that was needed to bring him in. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I don't think there was a guy that could have replaced deGrom like Verlander can, even though it is a shorter term deal. But they needed another top guy in the rotation, and he's going to fill that perfectly as long as he stays healthy. And you know he kind of performs still the same, even though he's getting older. But I think it was a really good move, and I think he's going to probably pitch well in New York.
So a couple of smaller deals. Jose Catana, nice reclamation year for him, and he gets paid 2 years, $26 million, $13 million a year. And David Robertson, another really great year for him, reclamation-wise, coming off a Tommy John 1 year and $10 million for him. Great deals for the Mets. They're very payroll-friendly overall. Catana, becomes your lefty in the rotation, really. Probably fourth spot, I'd assume. Probably maybe actually fifth, to be fair. When you look at it, because you have Verlander. Well, you have Scherzer 1, Verlander 2. Presumably Senga goes 3. And then I would probably assume Carrasco 4 and then him 5th. And then Robertson is a great piece, becomes more than likely your 7th/8th inning guy, replaces what Ottavino was, should he decide not to re-sign. I know there was a deal on the table at one point. I don't know where that stands right now. But either way, certainly probably takes the spot of whether it was Trevor May or Ottavino. And it's just a quality veteran arm who has played in New York before, obviously. So he understands the pressures of being at least within the city media market, and is a good veteran presence within that clubhouse, which, we again mentioned collectively they're still a pretty youngish unit.
Yeah, I like the move a lot for that team. I'm just still kind of thinking back to this past year's trade deadline. Mm-hmm. Like, the Mets are all in right now. They're grabbing relievers. They're grabbing starters. I just don't get why they didn't make a trade for a reliever at the midway point last season. I just think they would have been better down the stretch with a guy like Robertson. And I mean, now that they got him, that's good. But I just think back to that trade deadline that they weren't really all in.
It's tough. I think they picked the wrong Cub reliever to go after in Michael Givens, and it happens. I mean,
I'm wondering if that postseason performance kind of told Steve Cohen let's just go all in now.
And obviously, I know Nate has put him up there, but Kodai Senga, 5 years, $75 million, $15 million average, and obviously part of that too is the posting fee as well in that deal. So it's a great deal for the Mets. This is a guy who has certainly had beyond nasty stuff, as you can see from these World Baseball Classic highlights from the last time around.
Yeah, he's got guys shaking their heads.
Right. I mean, he's got the go-to pitch, and I hate how we kind of do this in a way with specifically Japanese pitchers, but it's a forkball, but it's kind of beyond that. It almost knuckles a lot, and a lot of people have called it the the gyro fork, hero fork, super fork, but man, is he good. And what a grab for the Mets.
Yeah, I don't know too much about him, but I think based on some videos that I've saw, he's got some good stuff, and I think he should probably perform pretty well. I mean, he's faced MLB hitters before, and he has the stuff to. I think he has. What does he throw, like 100-mile-per-hour fastball?
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah, he's got really powerful stuff. I think he'll fit in nicely.
Yeah, you can kind of tell from the highlights. I mean, it's just he's not exactly like the biggest dude in the world, but he does great stuff with his lower half of the body, and as a pitcher, I mean, that's pretty key. So let's address, I guess, the other elephant in the room here and address some of the players lost for the Mets, and the headliner being Jacob deGrom, signed a 5-year deal, $185 million, $37 million on average with the Rangers. Can't, I guess, fault maybe necessarily the Mets for just kind of letting him walk. 5 years is deep for deGrom, a guy who has had known health issues. And probably, my understanding was the Mets were probably about 20-ish collective million off on the deal. So deGrom was more than willing to walk. It sounds like he had been more than willing to walk for quite some time.
Yeah, I thought I read something. I don't know where it was from. Maybe it wasn't too reliable, but there might have been some clubhouse issues with him, him not talking to players or something I read. Obviously, it might have been, not a true article, but I'd have to go back and kind of find it. But if that is true, I think the Mets did the right decision to move on from him. They don't need guys like that in the clubhouse that don't really, want to be there. So I think they're fine without him, honestly. He only pitched in 13 games the last 2 years. He did perform well in New York. He's had really good seasons. The Mets fans should be thankful that they did have him, but I think it was the right time to move on.
Yeah, tough spot here as well. Obviously not as probably a big loss, obviously on paper, but to me, I mean, this one was kind of big-ish. Taijuan Walker, 4-year deal, $72 million, $18 million on average with the Phillies. I'm guessing this deal came down to lengthwise. I'm guessing the Mets weren't comfortable going 4 years on it because, I mean, the deal is in the neighborhood of what they did give Katana. So I'm guessing Taijuan probably wanted a couple extra years, whereas they only probably wanted to go 2 years on him. And that kind of sucks. To me, this one stings probably a little bit more than deGrom, at least from the actual baseball playing standpoint of things. But like I said, if it came down to 2 years and you weren't comfortable giving them 2 years, you probably have a good reason why you didn't do that deal in the first place then.
Yeah, and if it was because of the years, I probably would have taken Taijuan Walker over Jose Quintana, although Jose Quintana has pitched a little better over the last year or year and a half. But yeah, if Walker would have accepted a 2-year deal, I would definitely would have went him.
Yeah. And a couple smaller ones. Trevor Williams, 2-year deal, $13 million, $6.5 on average to Washington. And then Yuli Rodriguez, a 1-year, $2 million deal with Boston. So, Yuli ended up being a decently big piece for the Mets at certain points through the summer. And same with Trevor Williams. He had 30 appearances total on the year, was used as both a 6th starter and a stretch guy. So both guys obviously on their way. Yuli was a 1-year rental. Trevor Williams kind of came in on a prove-it deal, proved it, and he's going and getting paid.
Yeah, he had a pretty solid year from what I remember. Like you said, they used him in a lot of different spots. And if I do remember, he was kind of up and down a little bit at times.
Yeah.
So, but with his performance, he definitely deserves a contract like that, and hopefully he does well in Washington.
So a couple other, actually it's more than just a couple, it's a few other transactions for the Mets here to cover. Two of these names on this, what I'm about to say, they were already there, obviously, but they elected free agency, but signed back on for a little bit extra money. Sean Reed-Foley, Tommy Hunter, they're back, obviously, with the Mets last year, but they're signed back on to minor league contracts. They joined free agents Jimmy Yacobonis, Denny Reyes, Edgar Moreta, and Zach Muckenheim on minor league deals. Expect to see pretty much all of them in some form in spring training. Claimed right-handed pitchers Stephen Riding and Zach Green off waivers from the Yankees. Brutal.
Yeah,
brutal.
That's tough.
As well as left-hand pitcher Taylor Saucedo from Toronto. Acquired former top prospect in Brooks Raley from Tampa
That was a good
Bay.
move, I think.
Yeah,
Your new lefty specialist. I think he's better than Joely Rodriguez was. So good trade for Steve Cohen. And
I would say the ceiling is the roof. And they made two deals separately with Miami. First was getting right-hand pitchers Alicia Hernandez and Jeff Brigham from Miami. Hernandez is going to be in contention probably really for a spot in the rotation / long relief, and Brigham will certainly find a spot in the bullpen. And then in a separate deal, they sent outfielder Jake Mangum, former top prospect, to Miami.
That was tough.
Yeah.
That was a part of the player to be named later, I saw. In that trade.
So I thought it was a separate one.
Yeah,
that's
because Frank
interesting.
flipped out about it from Barstool.
Of course he
That's
did.
the worst trade ever.
Well, it's also probably has to do with Rule 5 because it was before Rule 5. So.
But some of these other guys on here that you just mentioned, I think definitely going to help Syracuse.
Yeah.
With their depth. They kind of struggled with that. Remember, they were
Right.
signing anyone at the end of the year, trying to bring in starters. But yeah, I think there's some good names on here that they brought back.
And obviously with Syracuse, we'll talk about them here in a few minutes. So, all right, let's move on to the awards season at the big league level for the Yankees and the Mets. A lot of people in New York bringing home some sort of honor. Start with the Yankees. Aaron Judge, first team All-MLB, MVP, Hank Aaron Award, Silver Slugger, and Player's Choice. You want to talk about racking up the hardware? Judge did it.
Yeah, he earned a lot of awards, but he deserved it all. Obviously, we knew he was going to win MVP. I think people that were kind of questioning it down the stretch, figured out that he was the MVP. I mean, look at his season. It's not gonna. I don't think it's going to happen again. And if it does, it's going to be a long time from now. Just an incredible season.
Other than that, a couple of Yankees, individually won awards. Jose Trevino, Gold Glove at catcher, but brought home the American League Platinum Glove. Platinum goes to just overall the best fielder in the game. Kudos to Jose. This was a guy who the Yankees brought in. Everybody thought was just going to be the backup piece. Ends up pretty much taking over the starting job, and it's his job to lose here on out. So great to see. Also, hometown guy. Really great guy overall too. So just really awesome to see him get rewarded for his hard work.
Yeah, and the fans obviously love him. They have a little chant in the stadium, Jose, when he gets a hit or something. But yeah, just a great season for him and a great story. I mean, even the trade that the Yankees got him, and it didn't happen until spring training of last year.
Yeah.
It was kind of a late deal because Ben Wartvet, he couldn't get anything out of him. So I think that
I'm still not convinced is real.
Yeah, so that trade actually turned into a big deal.
Yeah.
And then with Higashioka, he struggled in the first half or so year. I think that was a big move for them to get him.
DJ LeMahieu took home the first ever Gold Glove for a utility position, and the Yankees actually won the team Gold Glove for being the best fielding team, which is interesting to me given the fact that, they only really had two positions out there, and I believe the Guardians took home the most individual positions. So, really awesome to see, I guess, the Yankees, kind of hold down the field after we kind of thought that they weren't all year at certain points. So, kudos to them. The Mets, on the other hand, tied for second with most individuals receiving awards, and they're all kind of spread out and sporadic, but really the main headliner here is Edwin Diaz, first team All-MLB and the NL reliever of the year, and justifiably so. To me, he was by far the best reliever of the year anyway in the whole league, from top to bottom, and more than deserved the first team recognition.
Yeah, he definitely deserved it. Like I said earlier, I think it was a record-breaking strikeout per 9 innings.
Pretty sure it was 2 for 3.
Yeah, he just had incredible numbers. Numbers that sometimes I looked at and I was like, how is this even possible?
Right.
Because he had like double the amount of strikeouts in one inning. It was just like crazy.
Francisco Lindor and Max Scherzer both made the second team All-MLB. Obviously, Lindor at shortstop and Scherzer as a starter. Kind of surprised me a little bit with Lindor, I think, a little bit. But, you look at what he did this year was a really quietly great year. Did not get the recognition overall he probably deserved, and hopefully the second team kind of brings that more to the forefront of what he did this year. And obviously Scherzer missed a good chunk of the year, obviously, but, man, when he was on, he was on.
Yeah, for Lindor, I think, right, it was probably his best season in New York.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think he had a pretty underrated season. He was a big part of that lineup. When him and Alonso were clicking, that lineup was pretty good.
Mm. Jeff McNeil, Silver Slugger at second base, gave it the official position there, even though he kind of played a couple different spots throughout the year. And Buck Showalter made history winning NL Manager of the Year this year. Why, you may be wondering, is a history. 4th time he's won the award. Each in a different decade and each with a different team. crazy.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah. So kudos to the Mets there. Any maybe surprises overall to you that kind of popped out even throughout the whole league? For me, I was kind of surprised that Jose Ramirez wasn't getting as much love as I thought he was going to. But
yeah, I feel like though that's kind of always like that, right? I mean, maybe it's just because of the team he plays for. But yeah, that guy is really good, and I think he's underrated, and a lot of people don't really maybe they don't watch him enough. Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
There's some players in the league that I think a lot of people don't either watch enough, maybe because they're on the West Coast or stuff like that. But yeah, I agree with that for sure.
yeah, so all right, before we get out here, we do have to talk about our beloved Red Wings and Mets. They aren't, the big league teams aren't the only teams having to make moves. The minor league squads do as well.
Yep.
So, a couple familiar names in Rochester. Jackson Tatro, he's back. Minor league deal and assigned to Rochester. But Sean Doolittle signed a minor league deal with Washington. He's been outrighted to Rochester. I don't think he'll be ready for spring training from surgery he had. I could be wrong. But it will be exciting to see Doolittle in Rochester. In addition, former national prospect Yadiel Hernandez signed back with the Nationals on a minor league deal, as well as other prospects such as Evan Lee, Alberto Guerrero, Derek Hill, formerly one of the Tigers' top prospects, Hobie Harris, and a few different shortstops here, Eric Mejia, Lionel Valera, and Yasel Atuna, all been assigned to Rochester from Washington. So like I said, I mean, and same thing with Syracuse here in a second, they too have to fill out their rosters and get that ready and get everything ready to go for 23. For Syracuse,
one more thing on
go ahead.
Rochester, Paul. This just came out today, so I don't blame you for not seeing it. But maybe one of the more important signings or announcements from Rochester today. If you take a look at the screen.
Oh yeah, the Milo appearances.
Yeah, wasn't it 7 days and now it's 8?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
March
the best
31st.
boy.
I hope he's wearing a jacket.
No, he's got fur. He'll be fine. He's a good boy.
Sorry to interrupt. Just had to put that in there.
The Mets, they haven't officially really signed anybody or taken in anybody. Obviously, they'll have Sean Reed-Foley and the pitchers I mentioned before who signed minor league contracts. But they themselves claimed shortstop Mateo Gil off waivers from Spokane. Right-hand pitcher Wilkin Ramos from Bradenton. Shortstop Jonathan Orez from Norfolk. And outfielder Augustine Ruiz from Fort Wayne. So there are transactions in the minor leagues as well, folks.
And I think there'll be more as we
Definitely.
get into January, February.
Definitely. So, some awards to announce for both teams. Now I need to preface it with this. In the minor leagues, they have organizational all-stars. Currently, 5 organizations have yet to announce their all-stars. One of them is the Washington Nationals, the parent club of Rochester. So, unfortunately, we do have a few awards that have yet to be announced. We'll mention those obviously our next podcast, but didn't want to preface it with that before we jumped into where we get to Syracuse, where they do have organizational all-stars so far for the Mets. So we'll keep everybody informed with that when come time in January, but there's a reason why for that. So we'll start with Syracuse. Infielder Brett Beatty was the Met minor league position player of the year as well as an organizational all-star. Third baseman Mark Vientos was an International League end-of-year All-Star and Organizational All-Star. International League, actually all minor leagues this year did not have true All-Star game. Their All-Stars were announced at the end of the year as a award type thing, kind of like your all MLBs, if you will. Catcher Francisco Alvarez was the Organizational All-Star, and outfielder Jake Mangum Organizational All-Star. So a lot of the guys that we talked about a lot for Syracuse this year certainly made their presence known, and really the cream of the crop was at the top there, but when all is said and done for them.
Yeah, and isn't the All-Star game going to come back next year?
I believe it's next year or the year after. I can't remember exactly. I think it's not this year, but 2024.
It was just kind of odd.
Yeah.
They were on the All-Star break, and there just was no All-Star
Right.
game and nothing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed it again in the schedules because I'm going to be doing this isn't a true spoiler thing, but me and a friend of mine were doing a New York baseball road trip of sort this summer, and now we aren't doing it where it's like we're going to be gone for a week type thing. It's going to be over the course of a few different weekends. And I noticed that through the minor league schedules because obviously we're going to hit up Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Binghamton, Hudson Valley, Brooklyn. They all have this random 4-day break in July, but there's no All-Star games for next year, so it kind of sucks, but
Yeah.
I get it. So there are some, at least, awards for Rochester. Nationals did do some awards. They just don't have the organizational all-stars out yet. Cade Cavalli was the Nationals minor league pitcher of the year. Went back-to-back on it, won it in 2021 as well. Kudos to him. I finally was able to get up to the big league roster by the end of the year and certainly made his presence known there. Our guy, infielder Jake Alou, won the Nationals Way Award. Each organization has an award like this. This is just for a player who showed the most determination, skill, teammate, community, membership. Kind of like your overall just good guy-ish award type thing. To be fair, and he was awarded. He was added to the 40-man roster for the Nationals this offseason. Ripped through the organization this year. Started at A-ball, ended up at AA in Harrisburg, ended up at AAA in Rochester in July, and never went back down and only continued to improve. So kudos to him.
Pretty impressive for sure.
The outfielder Andrew Stevenson was named Rochester's MVP and most popular player as well. We made note of that a while ago, but just as a reminder, I know unknown really if he'll come back with the Nationals organization or not, but he has been a guy that has been in the organization for a while, been in Rochester really the past couple of years, and really just a great player, great community member, and much deserved to him as well.
Yeah, I think he's an all-around player too. He's got speed, he can hit, he can field. Just a perfect player.
Had dad power by the end of the year too as well. So
yeah.
All right, so that will wrap up Concrete Jungle for today. I know a lot of content there to kind of digest, but a lot of stuff to catch up on. Again, we'll be off until sometime in January. Come back with January and recap some stuff that's been going on, stuff like that. But that's going to pretty much do it for today. Pleasure to get back up here with you, Kyle.
Yeah, it was definitely fun to talk baseball. It feels like it's been forever.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's many more moves to come. I know the Mets will make more moves. I mean,
both teams will,
but
to be fair.
Yeah, I can't wait to do it again.
Make sure, if you haven't already, you check out the stuff he's doing for us here at FingerWaves1.com. On it usually right away as soon as the news breaks. So
I try to be.
I know I had to wake you up, I think, for the Aaron Judge news last week, but
yeah, I didn't want to admit that.
Well,
it was 20 minutes late.
You're busy. I mean, this is a busy time of year for you, so it's understandable.
Yeah,
I got you. Nate Sharman, thank you and appreciate you as always behind the scenes. I know he just saluted for everybody. He won't put himself on camera, even though he does have one now. So before we do take off formally here, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and yours. Happy New Year. Stay safe. Enjoy it. It's a fun time of year, a joyous time of year to be with friends and family. So enjoy it, be safe, but have fun. So for everybody here at Finger Lakes 1, catch us here when we're live on YouTube in the 24-hour stream. Catch up anytime on YouTube and Spotify and other major podcasting platforms. And until 2023, we'll see everybody then. Take care, everybody.